Chair, and thank all of you for being here. General Counsel Mornoff, I'm particularly interested in knowing what's taking most of the time in your department when it comes to regulatory obstacles or barriers. So we know where to focus our attention, because there's no doubt about the need. The transmission just referenced in the previous questions is a great example of difficulty. I mean, it'd be one thing to have all kinds of people ready to do stuff, but if there's regulatory barriers, good luck. So share with us what we should be focusing upon to try to reduce those barriers.
Thank you, Congressman. I think that the Commission is focusing on very similar issues, particularly on what needs to be done to ensure the reliability and affordability of our electric supply across the Commission's jurisdiction. In that respect, some of the issues that we've talked about today, looking at ways that we can increase the efficiency of the interconnection process in order to ensure that needed resources are moving through expeditiously. I think it's also really important to be considering, as we've talked about, if there are resources that are needed for reliability, but considering retirement, what are the steps that we can take, whether that's through consideration of market signals or other issues, other approaches. And we also continue to look actively, as my colleague Mr. Turpin has described, about what we can be doing to be moving infrastructure permitting as promptly as we can.
Okay, let's go to the permitting, because what I'm most interested in is how we can speed up what FERC has to do. And in my dealing with FERC, which had to do with relicensing of hydropower projects across the Northwest, I noticed that FERC was just as apt to be stalled out as any other organization by virtue of some of the laws that we have and some of the regulations under them. So which one of those regulations, in your opinion, is the most time-consuming for your department?
I could address that on the permitting side. I'm not sure that I could identify a single one. I mean, the U.S. has decentralized permitting. There are a myriad of statutes that every project has to comply with, and depending upon the circumstances and the scope of what's being looked at, any one of those could become sort of a long tent in the pole.
Well, I'm just thinking, when I think about the need for transmission and I think of the need for generation, and then I think about the need for permitting reform, it seems to me that permitting reform is the most important thing, because that's what's standing in the way of our actually getting those other two things done. So if I can't turn to you guys to tell us where the barriers are, who do I turn to?
Well, again, I'm not sure I could say there's a single. Permitting is something that takes a good while to do.
It certainly does, but tell me, why is that?
It's because of the issues that have to be looked at, and because of the panoply of federal statutes that exist for any kind of.
So I read the testimony, and I saw references to the Endangered Species Act and to other similar environmental protection statutes. Is that what you're talking about, or is there something more? Let me just share with you this. There are certain requirements that states weigh in on the relicensing of dam process, and I saw Oregon and Idaho held hostage by a state, Oregon, under those opportunities. How's that? Is that something you see often, where states using the consultation requirements under the ESA delay things?
I haven't seen that, I think, with the ESA. I have seen, we have seen relicenses that have been delayed while waiting on state 401s. And while that delay occurs, then new species might be listed or new critical habitat identified, and so then the ESA process has to be refreshed.
Mr. Goff, there's much talk about how we are going to be held hostage, and probably are being held hostage by virtue of foreign countries controlling the types of uranium and other rare earth minerals that we absolutely need and don't have. Is it your thought that we actually can somehow overcome this without protecting those who invest billions of dollars in the processing plants? Because when I've talked to people who are in that space, they're scared to death of dumping all this money in and then having the protections that tariffs and other things provide evaporate, and suddenly they all go broke. So how do we address that?
On the example of uranium that you brought up, one thing that I think was critical to make sure we have that investment, that the government provides some incentive for the companies to move forward, but they also need assurances that the adversarial entity that's providing the material doesn't come back into the market. So that was we were very thankful that Congress did pass a ban on uranium as well, because it would probably be hard for companies to invest, even if the government's putting in money, if they don't know that they're not going to be undercut later on in the future by if another country basically dumps material in that. So it's those type actions that will help enable to have that investment going forward.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very